Welcome back. Hopefully you had some time to share your takeaways and hear from your partner too. I know both of those articles had a lot of ideas. And we would love to see your thinking visible too. So again, we're going to go back to that Padlet and ask you to share under the response to reading in the first category, what are some of your takeaways and what are some questions that surfaced? And as you guys are getting ready to add to that, which again, you add that plus and you can make your comment, I want you to note that the title is Writing in Science. And our thinking today was really to do some of that practice with writing. So each of the activities that we have, we really thought we would think of ways that we would use writing in science. And how could we actually have you guys practice that as we go along, or even model that for teachers when you're supporting them through this journey too. So again, we're going to ask you to go ahead and click on that plus button right under the response to reading and share some of the things that are your takeaways. Already seeing some really good ideas generated, differences in using common language versus the language of science. I really like that last one too. Kids need interesting science experiences to write about. It's so important. Not just writing, but a way for them to communicate. Oh, I like it about explain, draw, make connections. I really drew a connection to the 4 different genres too. When we started to do this work, I just was thinking that, they'd respond in their journals and just write about what they just experienced. But there's so much more depth, bringing Amy alongside of what that might look like. Kari just put a great idea. If you have an idea that's similar to others, feel free to add into the comments. I see a couple of questions. Is there a suggestion of an entry point in a classroom that has little to no science instruction happening? It's a great question. I'm going to hold it out there for right now, and maybe that's something we can continue to circulate and go around, because we know, especially our science consultants can feel that sometimes, where sometimes it's very little instruction or it's not even high quality instruction. So what do we do with that, and how do we start to stimulate some writing with that? What might that look like? All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the next section off to my partner, Amy, and we're going to look at the EIPs and the SEPs.
All right. Hi, everyone. You may remember last time, if you joined us, we used a similar visual comparing the essential instructional practices to the science and engineering practices. That's what the SEP stands for. Last time we, as facilitators, we identified in color the commonalities between the 2 sides. This time we took that out and left it all in white, and we're going to ask you to do that work today. And before you do that, though, we're going to ask you to practice just a slightly different type of writing. And we're going to ask you, you're going to go into your A and B partner groups again, and take the first about maybe 4 minutes of that time to come up with a plan or a protocol on how you're going to approach finding those connections between the 2 sides. And then once you do that, we'd like you to add that protocol or that plan to the Padlet. And then we would like you to take the next maybe 5 minutes or so to actually do that. Use your protocol to find what the connections are between 2 sides. You're not going to get to all of them, obviously. And these aren't all of the connections. It's not an exhaustive list. But here, we thought these were maybe some of the more common ones or the more prevalent ones. So, and if you only land on one, that's fine. It's whatever you get to, that will be great. And then we'll come back after 10 minutes in the breakouts, and we're going to give you a chance to read some of the other comments and make some comments about those. So what questions might you have?
Why do we have to find this?
Okay. Wendy, are you ready to send them off in their groups? Looks like it. Thanks. All right, welcome back. Thank you for taking the time to put your ideas in there, your strategies for making connections between the EIPs and the SEPs. There's a couple different strategies. I was curious to know if anybody wanted to share any of their thoughts about the process that they used. I do notice that somebody put cut chart. I was interested in knowing a little bit more about what they meant there.
Oh, that was us.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
We just said that to cut the pieces apart so that teachers then would have to match the SEP to the IEP, and then discuss as to why that they made that choice to match those up, and it gets them understanding both sides a little deeper.
I love that. So you're talking about actually making some visual manipulatives of the cards and then do some manipulating with them to try to figure out where the connections are.
Yes, and then have
Yeah.
the real chart for them, because everybody always likes to check to make sure you're right. But if they can back up, there might have been a way that we wouldn't have thought about matching it up.
Absolutely. I do think it's interesting, not surprising, that all of you said that you would start with the EIP. And of course, being a science person, I would start on the SEP side and then try to match it up to the EIPs. But just seeing some really great strategies here, and appreciate you adding those. If you, during the course of the time here today, if you come up with or you want to add yours, please go ahead and continue to do that. And thank you for those that actually responded on there. That was really helpful too. So Wendy, if you could go to the next slide really quickly, I'd appreciate that. So I'm just sharing, this is what Cindy and I came up with. And like I said before, we just made the connections and highlighted those in the appropriate colors. And again, there's probably lots of other different connections that we didn't make or didn't even consider, but it was really helpful for both of us to do this activity together and talk through each other's ideas and kind of have both sides of the story. So this is available to you as well, but I like maybe starting without those identified first and let people make those connections on their own. All right. We are going to shift into sharing some of our stories around coaching and trying to make some of those connections. And I'm going to start us off first and talk a little bit about the district that Cindy and I worked with last year, in which we had a writing goal. And those are our folks on the left, our coach and our two teachers. And these are just some pictures of the notes that the coach took. You can see the meeting notes from December 12th are just some of her notes, and then a little bit more formal using the SLIC present state and desired state form. And that seemed to work pretty well for her. Their present state really was that they didn't have any notebooks, or they weren't using any notebooks or science journals during science instruction. They also had a MyKIP goal around claim evidence and reasoning that they were trying to address. And they did not have a lot of writing opportunities in their curricular resource. And so they really wanted to beef that up. And so their desired state, they landed on using science journals 2 to 3 times a week during science instruction. And this is 5th grade, so they actually are teaching science every day. And again, they wanted to provide writing practice for their students around claim evidence and reasoning. They wanted to give them chances to reflect on their learning and use sketches and drawings and models. And they also wanted to use it to lift conversations with students. So it's kind of a launching point. The next step, their goal ended up being, if you want to jump to the next slide for me, Wendy, thanks. Their goal ended up being integrating science and writing with the current curriculum by providing notebooks for every student to support opportunities to write in a variety of ways. And then you can see, again, a little bit about what they were looking for. And, I think they were going to loosely keep track of the amount of time that they were using the science journals with, again, like the goal of maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And they were looking for an increase in conversations between students using the journals as a starting point. And like maybe looking for, were there more productive conversations as a result of this practice? And then again, they just were exploring a variety of uses for the journal with a variety of different writing formats. All right, then the next part is we wanted to build some capacity. Our coach was fairly new and didn't know a lot about the writing in science. And so we had given all of our teachers that were part of the SLIC program and the coaches the notable notebooks, Scientists and Their Writings, which is a great read aloud. There's an activity in the choice board if you want to explore something around that a little bit more later. Also, you're all going to get a free copy of the notable notebooks provided by MAISA. So you should have gotten an email from Erin Brown. And if you want to get this book after today, you just need to fill out that form that she sent in the email. And in retrospect, I wish that we would have maybe used it a little bit differently, maybe a little bit more intentionally, because I think at the time we just shared it as a resource that they could use, but we didn't really talk a lot about how they might use it to launch using journals in their science instruction. We also used the article, The Science Writing, a Tool for Learning Science and Developing Language, which you read earlier. And that was really, really informative. We had some really excellent conversation around that in our group. Another resource for notebooking is from the California Academy of Sciences. It's the Science Notebook Corner. It's a great resource. There's all kinds of wonderful tools on there. And we gave that to our coach as a place to maybe start her learning and think about ways that she could support her teachers. And then a final resource that we found to be really helpful that we gave to our coach again was the Science Notebooks Writing About Inquiry. And the links are on the Wakelet. Yep, thank you for that, Wendy. Okay, so then this was taken right from our Learning Together session with the teachers at the end of their celebrations. And these were some of the things that they thought were really successful, that worked really well for them. And you can see the comments in the middle. Of course, all around are pictures of their classroom and some of the journal entries. But if you look at the inside where the comments are, there's at least 3, maybe 4 different comments about robust conversations and richer vocabulary discussions.
All right, have a good day. I love you. Be careful.
More meaningful conversations and more doing, less talking. Those were all really, really key things. Of course, they were strengthening their claim evidence and reasoning. The other thing that I really liked was the bottom left-hand one where student motivation, they noticed that interest really increased and kids were engaging in them. And you can see in the top right, there's a picture, they're sharing their notebooks and they're having some conversations about their entries. So that connection then that the article talked about, you know, writing and productive talk being interlinked, I think was a really powerful thing that was lifted. All right, and then finally, I just have a couple of examples of student work. On the far left, this again comes from that California Academy of Science, but you'll see two notebooks. One is a cover of a notebook and the other one is an activity. In science world, a lot of us have used this before, but it's called Draw a Scientist. And students are just drawing what their perception of a scientist looks like. It's a great formative assessment for teachers. And, you know, when we're trying to create student identity and let kids know that writing and science, you know, is mimicking scientists and engineers in the real world, it's a great place to start. And I think being able to decorate the cover of their notebook provides voice and choice. And that's kind of an easy entry point into the use of the notebooks. And then on the right, there's a couple of different things. There's a lot of sketches and drawings and labeling. The far right one is an investigation that they did about does air have weight? And so you can see kind of the results of their investigation. So they're collecting observations and they're sketching different things, and they will use a lot of these pieces for evidence as they move along. All right, and then the next one, there's three other entries. The one on the far left is really probably a little bit more difficult to pull out, but I would consider it a constructing explanation. They're trying to describe what happened in the investigation that they did. It's a little bit more of a narrative, but the middle one is a protocol that's really useful in science. It's the See, Think, Wonder, and it's a great way to ask kids to make predictions, and it's a great way for the teacher to see what their prior knowledge might be around the topic, and then they can get all of their questions out there as well. And then finally, on the far right, here's just an example of some data collection that they had done in an investigation. So I wanted to just give you, a wide variety of the different purposes that they had for the journals. And then last, before I pass it over, oh, thanks, Kari. Kari says the See, Think, Wonder charts are really useful on the first day of a unit when students might be seeing a puzzling or exciting science phenomena. Yes, thank you. Then this last slide, I just wanted to, I found this resource and I just wanted to share it with you. It's Science Notebooks in Student-Centered Classrooms, and the author, Jessica Fries-Gaither, is also the author of the Notable Notebooks, and she references it in this particular resource as well. I just pulled out parts of the book, and this is a chapter on, like using notebooks as a learning tool, and that it has multiple purposes. And you can see it lets students mirror the practice of scientists. It allows for all this sense making. Of course, there's the, you can go back and see what they've learned and how they've grown. Teacher can give them assessment and feedback and help them move their thinking and so forth and so on. So there's lots of great reasons and purposes for using the science journals during science instruction.
I just want to add one more quick thing, Amy, just to connect to this morning. You can see so many connections to the identity and skills and intellect and criticality and joy of our learners through all of these pieces, which it's exactly why Amy lifted this in there. There's such a great connection to the work that we were just doing this morning. So again, just lifting journals in different ways. I'm sure you saw the genres, but also just the way we see our students and the way we really identify as learners as well. I just want to draw that quick connection. Sorry, Amy.
No problem. And
May I
Wendy
ask a
just
question?
commented that Wendy, that Jessica's an elementary teacher. I mean, she's very experienced with all this, so this is a great resource. And I think it is linked on the Wakelet as well, if you're interested in it.
Eileen, do you have a question? Yep. You had a question?
Yes,
Go ahead.
I do. So I did my dissertation on this very topic. And one of the things that I haven't solved, I haven't solved anything, but of the many things that haven't been solved, is especially for elementary teachers and possibly secondary, but I did my study on elementary teachers, is how they think about science. Like I can give them like suggestions of notebooks or things like that, but how do they understand science in the way that the science and engineering practices or the the framework for science views science? Because I had imagined before you get to the notebook, you have to have this mind shift, or did you not? Did we start with the notebooks and then that created the mind shift?
That's a really great question. And it doesn't happen overnight for sure. And I don't think any of us have really solved that. But I think for one thing, with the teachers that we worked with anyway, I know that they were really a little unsure about introducing the notebooks because they didn't know where it was going to go. And they didn't know what they were putting in the notebooks might take the teachers, like whether they were prepared to really respond to that. But I think what they found was that the more practice they got putting entries into the notebook, the more they started to see themselves like real scientists and engineers. And if I could encourage those teachers to continue with this, I would encourage them to maybe take the next step, which would be providing regular feedback in those journals, like about how, praise, I guess, or for the things that they have in there, but maybe some tips or ideas for how they could improve their writing and how that could look more like, a real scientist or engineer. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think it's a matter of a lot of practice and just
Somewhat. I mean, we made that shit, like originally there were like those lab books that they did, and then we did textbooks and we just did answer the questions, and then people are like, what, hold it, science is doing, and still people are kind of still stuck in that science is doing part of it. And like it is, but and so I was just trying to think about how you create that mind shift in that writing. And I had another thought, but it went away.
One other thing I think that's really important is the prompts that the teacher might be giving the students before they go into their, but a lot of it comes from the classroom culture. I mean, they're not going to be as effective if the teacher doesn't have a classroom where it's safe to have conversation or make mistakes or, that kind of a thing. So Cindy, I think you were going to say something too.
Oh, I remember my question. Sorry.
Go right ahead. Ask your question.
My question was, to what extent do they align these notebook entries with the evidence statements from the next generation science standards? To like look at, to know what they're looking for in the notebooks.
Yeah, the evidence statements are a great resource. These were teachers that were in the very beginning steps of implementing the notebooks. Okay. So that might be a next step for us, but I don't think this particular group was at that level yet. They were not even
that all the time. She tells me I'm 4 steps ahead of where I need to be.
No, not at all. I think it's a great place to go to make sure that you're headed in the right direction, right?
Yeah. I'm just always thinking, she's like, well, we got to slow down.
Well, and I think you're lifting, what I was going to say is just, you're lifting the same questions that we had as literacy folks, and we really lean into our science people, because Jackie, who's not here, went to a conference and said, this is what we need our teachers to be able to do, which is why we did like that Foley artist piece last spring, and then even the experience that they had, because I think you're spot on. If you don't know what you don't know, and until you actually experience it, And our science folks, partners have been allowing us to be able to experience some of those things, to just start to shift thinking and what it really looks like. Like you said, there is such a big difference to the way we want students using journals to what we previously thought. And how do we make sure they're so intentional and connected to the cross-cutting concepts and really have our students thinking critically and not just, busy work kind of thing. So
Yeah.
good question.
Sorry, I'm also new. I didn't join this group in because I didn't go to Traverse City, and so I just popped in today. So I'm catching up as well.
No
All
problem.
good. All right, Wendy, if there's not any other questions, I'm gonna pass it off to Wendy.
Okay. And I'm really glad that you asked those questions. I think the other piece is the critical piece that maybe we didn't mention yet is that coaching piece, right? If you have that opportunity to connect with the science person and the literacy person, you can kind of see where people are and then figure out what are those steps that will take you to that next 5 to 10% to start that can kind of build and build over time. But it definitely building up confidence and capacity is something that we feel very strongly about. We had to do that ourselves as our team as well. Okay, so we shared with you an upper elementary example with notebooks, and we adore notebooks at all ages. But we also wanted to share with you what Kent did with Lowell. Mostly, I need to lean right on Kendra because I'm not going to make her unmute or anything, but Kendra's here, and I want to give her credit because she really did a lot of the work in this. This is not Christy and I. We just said, hey, what do you want to do? And Kendra's like, I got some of this and I want to do this. And then I've got some teachers who might want to do with it. So her and Angie were fantastic. But we also had a writing goal last year at Bushnell in Lowell. Their writing was focused on phonics, and right, we want kids to experience things so that they have something they're writing about on purpose, right? Everything we read has like somebody did something in order for us to be able to put it down on paper and then read it for ourselves, right? And so we want kids to have that same opportunity. But when you get into first grade, they also don't have all of the writing skills, all of the word and decoding skills that they need to put some of those things together. And so we met with Kendra and Angie and talked about present state and desired state. We had phonics and science writing were separate at the time and isolated. And so since the school-wide goal was on phonics knowledge, the desire was to maybe integrate those phonics pieces so that when the students needed to write in their journals, similar to what they did in 5th grade, they had the opportunity to do that with knowing how phonetically some of those words would actually spell out on paper. So we did, Kendra worked really well, and Angie worked, we worked together. Kendra actually built capacity within Angie's classroom and with her kids in thinking about what are some of the words that are in the upcoming science unit and some of those patterns that go along with those things that we might see. And I came up with like those content words to start, but then in true amazing elementary form, Kendra and Angie flew through that and got a lot more words out because that's not my area of expertise, right? So that you can see some of the pictures there that were being used for that. And so kids were learning the magic E and the IGHT because it was the sound and it was the a unit on nighttime and daytime and how those are different patterns of sky patterns in 1st grade. And so they were using IGHT quite a bit, or IGH and IGHT, right? So this is what's really interesting is Bushnell decided in Angie's classroom they were going to take Fridays off of regular phonics instruction and use the words that were going to be in the science unit. And so that was kind of different, right? So we were taking a little time out of our literacy time and we're still doing literacy, right? We're doing that integration work, but they're taking that time out to learn how we might use that within context of science. So we have purposeful writing time. And then of course you can't write unless you've got some experiences to write about, right? And so we didn't Angie had taught this unit before, so that was kind of fun. So they got So they went outside, they stuck inside, they looked at patterns, they had some night observations to do at home. But you can see the kids drawing their shadows. So different times of the day in this unit, they draw their shadows morning, afternoon, and night. So they can see how the shadow patterns change throughout the day. And then, um, they had a purposeful vocabulary booklet that went along with using the words, that kind of helped with the pictures, kind of a little mini Freyer type situation. And then you can see on the right, when it was time to draw their models of how nighttime and daytime worked, then they could transfer their understanding of that spelling into their writing in their models. And I believe there were also some more lengthy writing pieces, like a sentence or two, and I'm not that we don't have pictures of, but they were definitely there. So we used a combination of that phonics time and then the notebooking. Well, I shouldn't say I just sat there and watched Kendra and Angie do it because they were amazing, and had the opportunity to see the final product. So this was a little bit of a different twist that I would never have thought of, but we leaned into the expertise of Kendra and the willingness of Angie to try it. So it was really fantastic. And this is some of the reflection pieces on there, which I found, I think the one I will just mention is like the special ed teacher saying that the kids are really engaged. Why don't all teachers do something like this? Like, right? That's a huge compliment from somebody who's seeing kids that often get pulled from those opportunities or are disengaged because they're struggling regularly. And student engagement went from low to high. And then a few polished things, right? Like the first time you do something, nothing's ever perfect. But we talked a little bit about how we might even be able to make that model a little bit better over time. So that was the first grade example. And what we're going to ask you to do right now is our coach, all the way through, there were coaches available and in and out of these classrooms with the teachers and the coaches that were in district. So what we would like you to do right now is think about if you were thinking about writing, what might an ideal coaching cycle look like based on some of what you've learned today? And that's the reflection we would like you to do in your Padlet. Are you ready? This is really going to get fun. If I open the Padlet, here's the Create a Model tab. I just learned this. That's why I'm telling you how much fun it is. I'm going to click on that plus button, and then I can type a subject if I want. And then if I go over to these three dots right here, more attachment types, I have all these things I can do in a Padlet. Never did I know these things, but I can actually click and draw. So you are welcome to draw with words or pictures a model of a coaching cycle if you would like to. You do have to click save here to save it and then to publish it. If you want to, instead of draw, do something else like upload a picture or a video recorder camera or draw a picture and then post it up there by taking a snapshot on your phone, you're welcome to do that too. But we'd like you to take a couple minutes and I'll set a timer for about 3 or 4 minutes here and have you guys come up with a coaching model that might support teachers in coaching them up on writing in science. Any questions? All right, go ahead and get started. I'll set the timer. I'm gonna give you about 30 more seconds and you can post whatever you have and it's where you are, you need to be, kind of where you need to be at that time. But about 30 more seconds, you can post what you have. Thank you guys so much. So, our time seems to fly by really quickly in these meetings. And what we're going to ask you to do now is give you just a couple of minutes. We don't have a lot of time today, but to pop into the Wakelet and see if you want to dig in to anything on that Wakelet. And we can only give you about 8 minutes to do so. So during those 8 minutes, you can turn your camera off. There are 4 in particular pieces that you may want to explore a little bit more. So you'll see those right here on our choice board. But take about 8 minutes or so and just kind of breeze through some of those, maybe dive a little bit into one of those, and we'll come back together for a little bit of reflection time. So you can camera off and dig in a little bit. Any questions, let us know in the chat.
They probably forgot. They're like, "Oops, we were supposed to put that up at lunch."